Welcome to another this week's episode of Behind the Adaptive Human. Um, my name is Dan Ackers, and I'm the writer behind the Adaptive Human. And in this Behind the Adaptive Human episodes, I tend to go a little bit more in depth on why I chose to do the essays that week and everything else that has happened in the last or during the last week with the publication. So first off, things that has stayed with me this week. On Sunday or last Sunday, I published a piece called "Becoming Someone Who Was Always Working on Himself." That was a essay that was sparked by me reading a line that was, "What happens when you finally log off?" The initial obvious thought was that what happens when you turn off all technology, but I felt that was a little bit of a boring way of looking at it. And when I thought about it a little bit deeper, I started thinking about what if it means that you finally stop working on yourself. And that thought felt much more interesting to me, at least. Back in the day, self-development became a part of my identity because, well, I was in a very poor state after my parents divorced, and back then, finding some kind of ways of working on myself to understand myself was the way I coped, just trying to understand myself better. And from there on out, I read countless books. I looked at podcasts, whatever you can think of that could help understand the human psyche better. And it's been something that's going on more or less all the time, that I kind of try and look at things that where I can improve on myself. So therefore, this topic felt quite natural to me to go into. And then I thought about the question, well, what happens when I take a break from that? Or when am I finished, so to speak? Well, I don't know the answer to it, but at least I felt like the reflection was pretty good for that one. Then on last Tuesday, I had a live conversation with Ryan Maxwell, who's the author behind Chasing Maximus. We talked a lot about basically the life you built and the life you want. To me, this was a very much on topic kind of a question because, well, a lot of my publication is circling that theme. I felt like Ryan also is very much in the same, or writes around the same themes from a little bit of a different angle. And we got into many interesting topics that helped, or I believe can help many people, but perhaps especially men who are feeling like something is slightly off, perhaps are just wondering like what's going on. And I think a lot of people, but especially men, can find the parts of that conversation very useful. But yeah, if you haven't checked out Ryan Maxwell yet, do take a look at Ryan Maxwell and Chasing Maximus. It's a cool dude. Another thing that I noticed from that live was that I got quite a lot of good ideas for new pieces and notes that I could write in the future. And one of those essay topics came up already, or pretty much right away. Like on the same evening, I decided to write the essay called "The Gap Isn't Always the Problem," because the conversation with Ryan had resurfaced quite a few old thoughts that I've had around that topic, and therefore, because it became when the thoughts came up, it felt like this idea is much more alive right now, and I feel like I want to write about this instead of the original essay I had planned. So, well, at least now I got one more essay in the drafts that I could publish later if need be. But yeah, and the topic itself is something that's very much what I think I'm right, what I normally write about. So then that's the essay I published on Wednesday. Then I've started to this week. I also decided to try a few new experiments with my publication. One of them is the something I started actually yesterday, kind of like a recognition poems. Basically, I wanted to try and write a small poem about where I recognize something, and because I felt they could, well, poems in general feels like they can be quite strong to wake emotions with people. So I felt like it could be a good addition for me to try out writing a few of them. And turns out they felt very natural for me to write, and the initial results at least looks pretty promising. So at least I'll try out for the incoming future, or at least the one more week I'll try and write those and see how it goes. Another thing I decided to try out this week a lot was also restacking other people's thoughts more, which I haven't done for quite a while. I wanted to basically adding my own perspective on what other people are saying. 'Cause I do think it's fair that I try and put other people in the spotlight more than what I've been doing. Perhaps I've been building a bit too much on my own only, and and now that I'm trying to restack other people, I feel like that's giving other people more space. I think it's a good idea. It's not a, it just I'm still working through the odd feeling about it because basically I obviously want people to read my publication, but then I'm posting up and hey, look at this guy kind of restack. So I think it's just me problem, but still. But then again, this a few of these changes, and especially live last week, it feels like I've enjoyed a little bit of a growth spurt because I noticed also that there's more than 40 new free subscribers since the last live that I did. And that's very encouraging to notice. But obviously, the real question is that do they become readers? Who knows? We don't know yet. Okay, then looking forward about what's coming next. The next essay that I'm writing for Sunday, that I actually have it almost written at this point. It's also one thought that got resurfaced during the conversation with Ryan. It's thoughts that I've been skirting around, I think, with some of the previous essays I've written, but I haven't directly written about this one yet. And about this thing, it's far more vulnerable than most things I've published recently. So yeah, it's going to be a very personal piece, and it was surprisingly difficult to write. I think I took like 4 or 5 times longer to write this piece than the normal piece I write. But yeah, I think it's going to be a good one on Sunday. At least it felt important for me to write. Another changes I did try and do this the Adaptive Human podcasts on Wednesdays for a couple of weeks, but all the time while doing it, it felt like there was something a little bit off with that format I was doing, and because what I was basically doing was I wrote an essay, or mostly wrote an essay and then read it out loud. It was nice, but it didn't feel like this was a good essay or good podcast episodes. At first, I didn't know what it was, but when I was talking with Ryan and the first live I did last week, they kind of helped me realize that I think the podcast or this behind the adaptive human live format I'm doing could be a much more interesting podcast in the long run, because essentially this is far more on the fly improvisation talking than the pieces I did before. So my current plan is to change the podcast into to become the Behind the Adaptive Human instead. I think it. So we'll see how that starts going, but I think it's going to be an interesting try. It feels much more natural and better to me, at least. And the good part about me deciding to do this change for Wednesday is that the Wednesday's normal reflections come back, and I get to do 2 written reflections every week again. So I think that's going to be an interesting or a good update both for myself and for the publication. I think this is most of the things I was planning on covering. In the future, I hope at least to see the Adaptive Human grow into a bigger publication with more readers, and I hope to have a interesting and also see how I myself will grow during this process, because this is both the publication growing and me myself growing as someone who's not that used to being in the spotlight online, but now I am kind of trying to do that. So yeah, are there any questions that's come up here? If not, I think I'm gonna say thank you to everyone who is listening, and I'll see you guys in the next episode, or well, basically next week, or then I'll chat with you in some note or DMs. Feel free to ask me anywhere, anytime. Okay, thank you all for listening, and I'll see you around. Bye.